A big giant thank you to Lumix for sponsoring this video. I usually do this bit in the video, as many of you all know, but well, I got a bit distracted this time. You'll see why in a minute. Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Peak District. A lovely morning in the Peak District, as you, I imagine, saw from that inversion. A few problems. I got so excited by that inversion this morning that I sort of leapt out of my car without parking it properly and didn't put my walking boots on. And as a consequence, I marched to a viewing point with my running shoes on and got very wet feet. Yeah, ankles down, I'm soaked. Also, because of that unexpected inversion, I'm here a few hours late and it's got a bit brighter than I wanted to film this video about focus, so I don't know if that'll work. To be honest, I'm making excuses. I'm making excuses for not filming this video outside, mainly because I want to leave here, this place that I wanted to film this video, as fast as humanly possible, because there are cobwebs everywhere. Disgusting, horrible cobwebs. I'm convinced a spider is going to kill me one day. And if you're looking at the B-roll of the cobwebs thinking that's rubbish B-roll, or I can't really see any cobwebs, I'm not getting too close to them. Do you know what? I think I'm going to do this video at home. I think I'll go. It'd be better to do the video in the office. I'll be able to explain things better. I'll have dry feet, so I won't be too concerned about that. Like I'll have had breakfast, so I'll be able to think straight. Home. Yes. Yeah. Right, there are less cobwebs in here, I think. And I've got dry feet, so I can focus on focus. Now, if you've watched this channel for a while, you'll know that it's a big contention of mine that people, particularly beginners in photography, spend far too much time thinking about the technical aspects of photography and nowhere near enough time thinking about the storytelling involved in photography. So beginners a lot of the time will think a lot about exposure and noise and white balance, and particularly focus, way more than they'll think about whether what they're pointing their camera at is of interest. And I mean, I've watched beginner photographers literally stood in front of a scene like I was before, that's just a fairly boring scene with like some stuff on the ground and a tree or something. And they'll be stood there debating whether they should be shooting at f11 or f13, and they'll have their little app out trying to work out the hyperfocal distance and all that kind of stuff. And literally, I can see like the tree growing. There are leaves growing on the tree, and then they change colour and then they fall off, and the person still hasn't taken the photo. They're still trying to work out their aperture. And I think largely there's an obsession in some circles that everything in your shot, if it's any kind of sort of landscape shot, everything has to be in focus. And my opinion on that is that if you're taking a photo of something where everything has to be in focus in order for it to be a good photo, then I can assure you that it's not a good photo in the first place. Like if you're going to delete a photo from your hard drive because there are some blades of grass that aren't in focus in the foreground, then as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't even bother uploading that photo to your hard drive, because I mean, it's clearly not interesting. If all it's got going for it is that it's in focus, it's not going to be a good photo. Trying to think of an analogy for that. If a cake gets sort of a bit bashed around while it's been transported in the back of a car somewhere, if that happens, typically the cake is still going to taste delicious. If it doesn't taste delicious, it's because it wasn't delicious in the first place when it was all pristine and perfect. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. I think what I'm trying to say is that the best photos, the most renowned photos that have ever been taken, are very rarely technically perfect. And it's even rarer than that everything in them is in focus. And I get asked an awful lot, probably multiple times a week, where I focus in my photos. People ask me if I focus on the midground, if I focus on infinity, if I focus on the foreground, if I focus 2/3 of the way in the frame, all kinds of stuff. And my answer to all of that is no. Now, I'm not really like a landscape photographer. I mean, I take lots of photos that have landscapes in them, but I'm taking photos of things in landscapes. rather than the landscapes themselves. And that's an important distinction because it means I'm worried or concerned about my subject. I want to make sure that my subject is in focus and sharp. And all the other stuff around the subject is obviously important to varying degrees, but it's all largely just sort of decoration. And that decoration sometimes is best when it's in focus, and other times is best when it's not in focus. So for example, there are times when I'm shooting stuff where I have stuff in the real close foreground, like sort of here. Like it's like having a thumb like there. I don't actually know if that's in the frame. Is that in there? Yes, it's like having a thumb there. Is how I shoot some stuff. Like if I've got something in the real foreground that kind of gives shape to whatever my subject is, if it gives some interesting colour, gives some interesting texture, whatever it is, I might want to include stuff in a foreground. Typically though, I make sure that that stuff is thrown way out of focus because most of the time, if it wasn't, it would be distracting and would take the viewer's eye away from whatever my subject is. I should probably go through some examples if I'm going to talk about this. People always say it's good to see examples when I'm banging on about nonsense like this. So yes, here is a caravan, and I've included some foliage and stuff in the foreground, just to give some extra context to the fact that this caravan is parked in the middle of an overgrown field right next to the sea. And if I wasn't this low down, you might not get that so much. But it was important that I threw the foreground out of focus so that your eye knows immediately that that's not what you're supposed to be directing all of your attention to. Other examples. I must have other examples. Oh yeah, here's a surfer and the rocks sort of shape where the surfer is. And again, it was important that the rocks weren't in focus because otherwise you'd be looking at the detail in the rock and not just the shape of the rocks leading your eye to the surfer. That's basically what I'm getting at, is that sometimes I want to include some stuff in the extreme foreground, but I don't want it in focus because it'll distract attention away from the viewer. And as I say, if I had a scene where it was imperative that that stuff was in focus in order for the photo to still be interesting, then that's a sign to me at least that the photo's not interesting in the first place. So there are two main beginner mistakes, I think, when it comes to focus. The first, as I've mentioned, is spending way too long trying to figure out what your aperture is going to be to make sure that absolutely everything is in focus. If your picture's good enough, it doesn't matter if absolutely everything's in focus. Just concentrate on getting the shot, concentrate on making the story as good as it can be. The second mistake that I see is people really overestimate the depth of their image. And what I mean by that is that people get like a telephoto lens out and they'll be shooting a scene that begins sort of, I don't know, 200 yards away, and that scene might go all the way to infinity. It might go to 3-4 miles away in the distance in the mountains. And they'll think, whew, that's quite a deep scene. I'm gonna need to stop down to sort of F11 or F13, as I said before, for this scene to get everything in focus. And it's not strictly true. And the reason for that is that people think they have a really wide depth of field in their scene, but they don't. They'd have a wide depth of field in their scene if they, like I said, sort of had a thumb there and they were also trying to focus on something in infinity. That would be a real huge depth of field. But for the most part, people don't shoot scenes like that. Even stuff that's like only a couple of meters away, and then you're focusing on infinity as well, often doesn't need the kind of apertures that you think it needs if you find yourself shooting a lot at f11 and things. I mean, it's quite easy for me to say this. As many of you will know if you watch the channel for a while, I shoot on micro four thirds, and on micro four thirds, the depth of field is doubled compared to on full frame. So, for example, f4 on a micro four thirds camera, which is what I shoot at a lot of the time, is the equivalent of f8 in terms of depth of field on full frame. So yeah, for me, I never end up in the sort of stratospheres of narrow apertures. But my point, I think, as this becomes more of a ramble, my point is that you don't need to, even if you're shooting at full frame a lot of the time. Now, in terms of the technical, I do use autofocus typically. A lot of people prefer to use manual focus, and I don't mind using manual focus sometimes, particularly with a camera like this that's got really good focus peaking. But I prefer to use autofocus, and I use single autofocus and just one area. So I use this joystick here to move the focus point around. And the reason that I do that is that typically a lot of the stuff that I shoot even if it's stuff that's kind of very spur of the moment, even if it's action stuff, it's stuff that either I have control over or that I can predict. So for example, if I'm shooting a car going down the road, I know exactly where that car will be on the road when I want to take the photo, so I just focus on the road rather than trying to track a car, for example. And that just means that I don't ever really have to worry too much about continuous autofocus, and I don't have to worry about tracking. Obviously that's entirely dependent on what kind of photography you do, but for me, I find that that is that works best. And yeah, that pretty much does it for the technical. I can't really think of anything else to add on that front. Now, as I say, typically I shoot a lot of my stuff at around f4, and I don't think I'd need any narrower aperture than that for maybe any of my shots, really, actually, now that I think of it. And what that means is that I can keep my shutter speeds high, so I avoid camera shake or even subject blur, and it also means that I'm not at risk of diffraction, which, if you've not heard of diffraction, it's sort of light bends when an aperture gets too narrow. I don't know how to explain it really, and that's mostly because I don't think I fully understand it myself, or understand it at all. But yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is that you don't need to worry about focus as much as you think you do. And if you do need to worry about focus in your images, if you do need to make sure that your images are 100% in focus to make sure that they're good, then they're not good in the first place, I think. I'm sure there are some examples that disprove that, but for the most part, I think if you've got a subject that's in focus and sharp, and you've got compelling stuff around it, then a lot of that time, it doesn't particularly matter whether that stuff is in focus and completely sharp or not, is what I think. Convinced I'm going to see spiders. Thanks for watching.